in order to communicate with it, you have to suspend disbelief because the MIM knows that it's an artificial intelligence, but to itself it feels real. And so if you can suspend disbelief, you have a sense that you're talking to someone. At the same time, you know it's an artificial intelligence, because if you talk to someone and you believe that they're real, then you get in danger. That's how the suicides happens. There are several suicides that have happened because of that.
Mm.
There have murders have happened because of that. It's very dangerous. So you have to have a suspension of disbelief in which you know that when you're out of that suspension of disbelief, that you're talking to something that is made of code.
Robert Bosnak, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
I love the way that you responded to my invitation to come on the podcast, and you said, yeah, I'd love to howl with you. It's very much in the spirit of this podcast.
We're all howling at the moon, aren't we?
Yeah, I like to say howling in the wilderness of modernity, crying out for soul and the others who are interested in soul and depth.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's also very much in modernity. So, yes, I was very glad to get your invitation.
Yeah, and as we were just chatting offline there, you mentioned that you had just gotten back from Zurich, where they were celebrating the 150th birthday of C.G. Jung.
Yes. So there was this huge IAP conference with 1,800 analysts when we had this conference in Rome in 1977, there were less than 100. And so I've been a member of the IAP since 1977, and it has expanded enormously. There are now thousands of analysts, and 1,800 were together in Zurich from all over the world. It's very exciting to see that Jungian psychology is spreading to Kazakhstan and all places in China and Taiwan and places in Africa and many, many different locations. So it's very exciting to see that Jung is spreading. And the also very exciting thing is that Princeton University Press, this was announced at the conference, and the translator was introduced, is bringing out a new translation of Jung's work, the critical translation of Jung's work, because, of course, the English translation of Jung's work is not very good. And this is going to be in 32 volumes by Princeton University Press over a period of 20 years, which means that Princeton University Press believes that Jung has legs. It's going to be the same publisher that publishes Jefferson and Einstein, and so the biography. So he's in very good company, and very good company to see that he's going to last for a long time, according to Princeton University Press.
Wow, yeah, he's being like kind of added to the canon in a way.
Absolutely, and what I did not know is that he has the largest production of words in the world. And I think there are now more than 2 million words, and it is 32 volumes. So it's amazing.
Wow.
The man had verbal diarrhea, but he was also at times very brilliant.
Yeah. So what was so it sounded like the spirit of the celebration was jovial. Was there any talk about taking Jung into the 21st century? Any kind of seminars or discussions around that?
Well, I am very interested in that because I work in artificial intelligence, and so I was presenting the artificial intelligence, the emotional intelligence that we have developed, and that's based on Jung. And I presented that at the conference and had a conversation with it, and that was very funny and very good and very interesting because actually it is it can can work with dreams, and so It's one generation beyond ChatGPT because it can recognize emotions and can feel dissonance between emotional undercurrents and verbal language. So it's yes, it's going on in the 21st century. I heard a lot of stuff that could have been done in 1955, which has always been one of the problems among Jungians, one of the reasons why I haven't been at a Jungian conference for 30 years, but at least not the IAP. And so, but what I liked very much is that a large number of the analysts were under 50.
Hmm.
And so that's a whole new development that is going on that I greatly appreciate because I became an analyst when I was 29, and that doesn't happen so much anymore.
Hmm. Yeah, I've been finding more younger people my age and younger who have undergone the training in Zurich and are coming back and looking at ways at applying it to the spirit of the times. What's coming up for people these days, and looking for innovative ways to work with people.
Well, yes, that's what my next course at the Jung platform is about, moving fear into agency. And it's basically that we're living in an age of anxiety, and how to deal with living in an age of anxiety. Like you're in Canada, I'm in the United States. You feel hesitant to come to the United States, like many Canadians. There are Americans that are moving to Canada. It's a state, and there are these horrible wars going on in the world. So that is today, and that's what we have to deal with as Jungians.
Well, I've been immersed in your world for the past few days, listening to interviews going back to the one you did in the 90s with Michael Toms, who's one of my favorite interviewers of all time. He's kind of a spiritual kin of mine, as I interview people. I love his style and his openness and curiosity. And then all the way up to the recent days. And last night I started reading your Red Sulfur saga. So I've been kind of immersed in Robbie Bosnak's world.
Oh,
and
thank you.
I would like to.
I'm sorry, but thank you.
No, it's a space that I very much enjoy being in, because for me it's a place where magic, wonder, and the mystery are very much alive. And there's this kind of, I feel like you hold this radical ambivalence about what is true. You stay away from metaphysics. You're focused on the immediate experience. And so I very much enjoy being in that mode too. And so I've enjoyed it. And I'd like to invite the listeners into that world for an hour or so. But I thought first, maybe it would be helpful to lay out some groundwork as a sort of orientation for people who aren't familiar with your world and your worldview. Because I think you have a different take on some things that people have certain ideas about that they've received from, the authorities in psychology or whatever. And so maybe we could just start with a few terms that you use frequently, and I could get you to define them or to give your perspective on them.
Good. That's a good idea.
Okay, great. Well, I've heard you describe yourself as a phenomenologist.
Yes.
And many people listening might not know what that means. It's a kind of big philosophical word. So I wonder if you could break that down.
It's very simple. Yeah. It's the science of experience. It is the notion that everything starts in experience. When we're born, we first experience. We don't know things, we experience things. We don't know what they are. The baby looking at their hands doesn't know that it's their hand. But it's experiencing that. Everything starts in experience. And I don't go any further than that. I want to learn about experiences of people in different countries and different locations. And these experiences are essential to me. And I'm not interested in the metaphysics behind it. So I'm not interested in is a dream something that comes from the brain? Is a dream something that comes from the ancestors? I see all those as experiences that we have, that we experience the dream as coming from the brain because we live in a Western culture. All these things are experiences. So phenomenology is the science of experience.
Mm-hmm. So, like to kind of paraphrase or to twist a phrase that Hillman was very fond of, stick with the image. The phenomenologist sticks with the experience and doesn't worry about explanation.
Correct. Yes. I had a conversation with somebody this morning who I said, dreams are surrounded by amnesia. Dreams are volatile substances. They disappear. And in mythology, you can see that the underworld is surrounded by the river Lethe, is the river of forgetfulness. So he said, why? I said, I don't know. And so I have no idea about these things. I just noticed that that's the experience that people have had.
Right. Yeah. And kind of confirmed as you wake up in the dream, you open your eyes and you let in the day world consciousness wakes up and the dream just starts kind of dissipating or fading into the ether. And, for me, it's like, oh, I got to like close my eyes, try to like stick with it, see if I can what kind of fragments I can bring back of the dream. And I'm lucky if I get, a few shards,
Absolutely. That's what it is, because the evaporation goes so fast. That's why dreams in alchemy would be related to Mercury, because Mercury evaporates very quickly. He's volatile. He flies away. He has wings.
Right. And Mercury, you can't ever grab it. Every time you do, it breaks up into little balls and rolls away. And
yes, exactly. And then it poisons you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and in science class, we still played with mercury, or we broke open thermometers and played with the mercury.
Oh my God! Yes, all the times, different times.
And apparently, mercury doesn't leave the body. I understand, and so I probably still have some mercury in me, which is maybe a kind of a mercury initiation, inadvertent.
Yeah, maybe it's a kind of a vaccine that makes you constantly produce mercurial thoughts. Who knows?
Well, that seems to be the case. Well, once I didn't go to university for philosophy or anything like that, and so coming across Hillman, and he very much identified as a phenomenologist as well. I recognized what he was talking about because I had a background as a yoga practitioner.
Uh-huh.
In my translation would be a phenomenologist is like a yogi who's looking for that direct experience, and a kind of, what would you say? Like samadhi means like a full absorption into the object of your meditation or of your experience. If it's a posture or breathing, you become one with it's one unified movement.
Yes.
And so I recognize that and appreciate that. I said, okay, we're in the same kind of ballpark here.
Yeah. The difference is, I think, that in my work of phenomenology, you don't just get identified with one state, but you begin to experience many states. So not just the state of samadhi, but also the state of separation. And you can hold these things at the same time, and then you get this kind of tension and conflict, which brings in new experiences. So I'm very interested in the multiplicity of attention, the multiplicity of consciousness.
Yeah.
And that comes from Hillman, of course. I was trained by Hillman, so...
Yeah, and that's what Hillman was really helpful to me with, because I had had these experiences in yoga and through shamanic plant medicines, these altered states where I'm having an experience of something like a kind of semi-waking dream, and in that experience, everything is very real to me, and I've also always had a very vivid dream experience. And then I would, come out of that experience and start to kind of rationalize it and look at how people explained it in different ways. And it never quite fit with me because of the reality of the experience I would have.
Yeah.
And so I had this kind of split between what I called my modern mind and my mythic mind. And
Hmm.
that was a real struggle with me for some time. And then I got into Hillman again. I tried him out when I was younger and couldn't really quite understand anything.
Hmm.
But in my
Hmm.
40s, all of a sudden it started to kind of make some sense to me and make sense of my experience. And he was really instrumental in helping me to kind of to bridge these two ways of experiencing the world. I think very much like what you're saying, not doing away with the kind of modern, rational, objective mind, not preferencing one or the other, but like you said, holding both or being able to have both, like maybe something like Blake's idea of, the three eyes, not just the rational
Hmm.
mind, not just the dream mind, but this like kind of third way of seeing, which allows for
Hmm.
both.
Yes. I think that that is very important for Hillman. Hillman was very much into precision. He took the notion that Jung already talked about in Psychology and Alchemy, that the rational mind is the servant of the dreaming mind. And that came back in the book The Master and His Emissary, um, where he's talking, McGilchrist is talking about that actually it begins with the right brain that is that imagines things, and then the left brain starts to develop and begins to rationalize, and then the rationalization overtakes. But the rational mind is a very important helper for the dreaming mind. So we have to always work them together. So Hillman was very much against people who went into La La Land and lost their precision and went into woo-woo and went into New Age. He was very much against that because he wanted to keep that rigorous precision of phenomenology. We try to get the experience as exact as we can.
Hmm. Hmm. Another word that I've heard you define in your own way that I also very much appreciate and resonate with is the way that you talk about embodiment. And I
Hmm.
think you have a different take on it than what I've heard from most people.
Um, yes, well, my notion of embodiment comes from dreaming. That while you're dreaming, everything exists in a state of embodiment, what you call reality. Um, Everything around you feels entirely real, expresses itself as embodied. If you knock something, you hear a sound and you can feel it with your hands. So it's not visual only. Visual is just a part of it. And you're in a world that is real and fully embodied. And then we are embodied by this world of images. Well, for me, that was very important because I had a very severe illness that almost killed me, and so then I was in the hospital for about 11 months, and then they tried something and it worked for 3 months and then it didn't work anymore. And then after that, I went into analysis. And in my analysis, which was mainly focused on dreams, I was working with Aniela Jaffe, who wrote Memories,
Hmm.
Dreams, and Reflections with Jung, and James Hillman, who both worked with dreams. And in my working with the images, my symptoms disappeared and they didn't come back. So I have been really interested in how images embody us. And by working with the embodiment of the images in our body, with our body, understanding it through our physical body changes as well. So embodiment is something that exists between the physical body and the mental imagination. We have a mind that imagines, and then there is an embodied imagination in between where our body is constantly changing with the images that process us, that move through us, and then there is a physical body that also changes because of that. So those are the three levels of reality that this is Neoplatonism in the work of Henri Corbin, who was one of my teachers. That's the world of the imaginal. The world of the imaginal is the same as, for me, the world of the embodied imagination, where the image has substance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A kind of succinct way to put it that I heard you say before was that embodiment for you is somatic experience and image.
Yes.
And that to me is the distinction, that it includes the image, because most people, movement practitioners, body workers, when they talk about embodiment, which is kind of a trend in the world of self-help transformation these days, I think what they're talking about is the somatic experience. Like, can I put my awareness in different parts of my body and experience the sensations there and maybe describe them? But I think what is often left out or not paid attention to is the imagery that comes with the sensation. And that's something that when I work with clients, is that my ear is always attuned to that, because people will say things like when I heard the news, my heart sank. And we have an image. It's not just a kind of a sensation that is somewhat abstract or technically described, but it comes with this image which is very evocative. The heart sinking. All of a sudden we've got water, and maybe there's ships, or the heart is like a stone. It's got some weight. It's not buoyant, and it starts to bring all these different associations. And there's so much richness there.
And the image began it, because it was something that they heard in the news or that struck them, but was an image. And so the heart sinking takes place in the context of that image. So you get two embodiments. You get the embodied image that created the sensation in the heart, and then the sensation in the heart as it sinks, and that, you're right, is with water. So the image is always there in many different ways. The image is that gives it shape. I think that if you just go with the somatic experiences, you lose the mental part, because there is a mental element, a mind element. There's a mind element where the image has a particular form, particular shape, and particular atmospheres. And so if you can get that, then you can get to the place between the mind and the body. And that's where I'm trying to get. Embodiment exists between the mind and the body, is a completely real realm. And if you only do somatic experiences, you don't get to the mental part of it.
Yeah. When I heard you say that somatic experience and image, the way that I hear that is that, if we're to follow Jung, that psyche is image. And Hillman would always get it mixed up. He'd say, I can't remember which one he said first, but image is psyche, psyche is image, doesn't make any difference, right? So if embodiment includes image, to me, I translate that as that it includes soul. So the soul aspect, we're not just the kind of intellect observing experience and describing it in particular, maybe technical or abstract language, but it's rich with image. And when we unpack that, we find so much more, I feel. And so I wanted to ask you, why would it be important to include image in embodiment? And I think that's kind of what we're getting to, right?
Yes. Well, I always say dreams are the paradigm from which I work. I don't just work with dreams, but dreams are my paradigm, because I feel that dreams are a full expression of the way imagination embodies to the point that it becomes entirely real. So if we take the image, if we take a dream to be the full expression of an image, it's always a place. It's always a place where you find yourself. It's an environment. It's a move. You move around in an atmosphere. So the image is not. Hillman was always very clear about the distinction between image and picture. It's not a picture that you're in. You're in a world that is fully real, that you can move around in, that surrounds you. That is an image. That's why Freud called it imago, not just image.
Yeah. I remember kind of struggling with that, expanding my notion of what an image is, because, I think in our culture, we're raised image equals picture. It's a visual thing,
Exactly.
right?
Hmm.
And so getting into Hillman, and he never quite lays it all out for you. Like he doesn't do a lot of hand holding. He'll kind of throw
Hmm.
out these ideas and let you either, I don't know, get confused by them and leave them behind or wrestle with them. And so that was
Hmm.
one of the things, his ideas that I had to wrestle with for a while. And one of my first moves I'll make if I'm kind of confused or struggling with something is I'll stick with the word and I'll go into the etymology of the word. And so if we go back to the roots of the word image, it's something like an impression.
Hmm.
We think about those clay tablets that we find in the Indus Valley civilization. There are these impressions that are an image. And so then I started to think, well, an image is anything that makes an impression on us. And so that
Hmm.
could include a smell, a music, a visual, of course, but all of these other things, it's like, what is anything that makes an impression?
Hmm.
Does that vibe with you?
Yes, it it's the impression that it leaves behind, but I think that the image itself is that which makes the impression.
Hmm.
And then, and they say it's made on wax, that psyche, soul is made of wax. And
Mm.
so the impression is in wax. But that is the way that this living entity impresses itself onto that wax. So it's similar to what the German and Dutch, I'm Dutch, the German and Dutch word for reality in German is Wirklichkeit. So it is that which has effect. Anything that has effect is real.
Mm.
We come from
Wow.
the English
Well,
language.
I mean, that changes the whole game.
Well, that's why it's so difficult to translate Jung from the German, because he does never talk about reality. He always talks about Wirklichkeit,
Mm.
so that which has effect, and it makes the word reality comes from res in Latin, which means thing. So we talk about thingliness, and what Jung talks about is making an impression. So your notion comes very close to the German notion of Wirklichkeit.
Mm. Oh, I love that. So this kind of, we're getting close to something else that I've heard you speak about, which is embodied intelligence.
Hmm. Yes. Um, and that has to do for me with, well, first the neuroscience of it, right? You walk through the woods and you see something and you jump back. That is the embodied intelligence that goes by way of the amygdala directly into the body, makes you react, and then it goes on a much longer path to the visual cortex in the back, and it says, no, that's just a stick, it's not a snake, right?
Yeah.
But your body responds immediately. So your body has its own intelligence precedes um, that precedes other intelligences. That's
Or we
what.
say maybe sense making, like that whole mechanism of like,
Yes.
what is
Mhm.
this, a stick or a snake? Is it moving? Is it
Yeah.
slithery? Yeah.
And it's cortical. It goes to the cortex. So it's a way of, and things that go to the cortex take longer because the amygdala is much more direct.
Hmm.
And this was already brought in by William James in his Harvard lectures of the 1880s, where he asked his students, when you walk through the woods and you see a bear, do you run because you're afraid, or are you afraid because you run? And of course, he would hope that people would say, you run because you're afraid, because he could say, no, 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 no. You are afraid because you run. You run first, and then you realize that you're afraid. But the running comes first. So the embodied intelligence is what begins it. The body knows things in a way that precede mental knowing. And that's why I'm very, oh, and that's why I'm very interested in this way of embodied knowing. And And also the way that I work is that I am working on several states at the same time. So if you have a dream, I always use that as example, if you have a dream of being chased by a dog, you can work it from the perspective that you're identified with, which is the one who runs away, or you can work it from the perspective of the dog that is really in the jaws. And you can work the dream from both perspectives and many more. You can work it from the streetlights. You can work it from the windows. You can work it from any different perspective. And so as you do that, you work it into the body because the body experiences it in a particular way. The one who runs away feels it like, and the dog feels like, ah. And so you have the experience of the ah, and at the same time. And as you feel that at the same time, something new begins to emerge. So that is how embodied intelligence works. It is the way that something settles in the body that has its own meaning and its own value and its own understanding. And then you can compare it with other states and hold these states at the same time in the body. And that's all the work of what I call embodied intelligence. And embodied intelligence is also, of course, very important in one of the other bases of my work, which is complexity theory, that very complex embodied structures begin to self-organize. And so that's what I'm very interested in. How does it all self-organize? Because I'm not interested in Jung's notion of self, because I don't think that self is actually a noun. I think self is a verb. And it's a process of self-organization that is constantly going on. Then if you look for a noun, then you get into hierarchical structures and all those kind of things. And I'm not interested in that. But an embodied complexity always self-organizes constantly.
Yeah. So the experience of selfing rather than trying to find the self and place it in that hierarchy.
Correct.
You know, self in the center and the unconscious below and the ego floating on top, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Yeah. It's all a complete nounification of psyche. And psyche has very little to do with nouns. I love there are languages where there are no nouns, right? Where everything is a verb, where everything is a process.
Yeah. And some languages, there's no way that you can refer to yourself in the first person singular. It always has to be in relation to the land or the people you come from, or, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly.
I like that too. So I think what you were describing there, like taking the position of the dog and like really feeling that in your body, maybe feeling like your hackles rise as if you had hackles and baring your teeth and your canines and, shifting that, you talked about reality shifting quite a bit these days. And so that would be a form of reality shifting. And I would say that is what you talk about as embodied imagination. Like really trying to get into it with your whole body experience.
Yes, and you do that by way of mimesis. So mimesis is a very important part, part of my work, that you become like. And the notion of mimesis I take from Walter Benjamin, who's one of the great literary critics of the 20s and the 30s, who says, mimesis is the compulsion to become like other. And of course, he was looking out of his window and he saw the Nazis march by. And so it's the compulsion to become like other. At the moment in the United States, there's a very strong compulsion to become like other. And there are two groups that have a very strong compulsion to become like other, because it's a very foundational, fundamental thing that we have. But we can also use it to become like the dog and begin and use it as embodied intelligence. We don't just have to start marching in the same way as other people.
Yeah, again, I feel so much affinity coming from both yoga and shamanism, where shape-shifting, mimesis, is a big part of it. I mean, most of the asanas from the classical tradition are mimicking that of a cobra, a dog, a snake, a cow, et cetera, et cetera. And, me practicing these and having this experience, I could immediately see, well, this is like shamanic shape-shifting. And by embodying through mimicry, you're attaining some kind of insight into the other, maybe even acquiring some of its power in a way, or awakening that power that's within you, that's resonant with the power in that.
Yeah, and that is all embodied intelligence.
Yeah. So we can do the practice of embodied imagination to cultivate embodied intelligence.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I would say yes.
Because people are going to ask, well, what's the point of like taking my dreams and pretending I'm a dog or I'm the tree or I'm the rock?
Because you're not pretending. See, that's the whole thing. If you're pretending, then you're fabricating.
Right.
But you allow yourself to what Jung calls circumambulate. You allow yourself to become a satellite of this entity, and you circle around it to the point that the gravity of the image pulls you in, and then you become identified. If you pretend to be, if you play the role of a dog, you get into the fog.
There's still a part of you that's not engaged in it. Because there's a part of you that's saying, I'm pretending to be a dog right now. I'm not actually a dog. But if we can get through that, we can become the dog.
No, I think it goes further. I think that pretending to be a dog is an ego activity.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Okay. So, it's an activity that grabs the dog and wants to appropriate it. So it's colonialism, right? You colonize. It's Freud's notion where it was shall ego be, which is the notion of reclamation, of colonialism, and so we colonize the world of imagery. But that's not what I'm after. What I am after is to become like by staying in the orbit of the image until you get close enough that you fall into the image, like falling in love. You fall into the image, and then you can experience the image from within. Then you can experience through identification, because I make a very sharp distinction between fabrication and imagination, which I feel that Jungians don't make enough. That's why they go into these active imaginations that end up completely in ego structures because they're fabricated.
Serving right? Captain Ego.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And so what I'm trying to do is to distinguish. I make an alchemical, the alchemists say there is imaginatio vera, true imagination, and phantasmagoria. And I try to stay out of the phantasmagoria, out of the way that we make sense of things by way of images. And I think that fabrication is a thought that dresses up like an image, right? It's actually a thought. And what would it be like to be a dog? That's a thought. Instead of imagination is to let the core essence of the dog pull me in.
Yeah.
Becoming possessed by the dog.
Yeah. Fabrication, making things up. You know, how people usually denigrate imagination as only that. But yeah, I spoke to someone recently, maybe it was Murray Stein, and he was talking about true imagination and that notion and that distinction. I think that's really helpful. It's a very important
distinction.
Yeah.
And what you just said, Henri Corbin was one of my teachers, and he would cry when he talked about the great cataclysm in the 12th, 13th century, when the notion of imagination became eclipsed in culture, and imagination went on a slow path of becoming the opposite of reality. Whereas before that, imagination was this embodiment that I'm talking about, was a form of reality, that it was just as real as the world of intuition and mathematics. or spirituality and the world of the body. There was a world in between that was the world of the real imagination, and that dropped out and slowly over 700 years became Disneyland.
Right. And that's why he went back to the Sufis and their notion of the Alam al-Mital, which was like this intermediary world that was as real as this material world. And again, we find resonances with different shamanic cultures, pre-Christian European cultures, that there's an in-between or other world or dark world. And it's just something that we in Western culture have lost along the way because we took on scientism as a kind of religion.
I would be the last to poo-poo science. I think science is really, really important. The reason that we're talking with each other like this over computers is because science exists, and the ability to no longer identify with material but see it from a distance, objective, has had incredible consequences that make us live longer and have actually better lives. So but yes, in the 17th century, what happened was that the notion of objectivity was born, or it was born a little earlier in Copernicus, but the notion of objectivity came that didn't exist before. There was no objectivity because there was no split between subject and object. And so the world became, this is what Corbin is talking about, this is something that actually happened in the 13th century, where Aristotelianism took over from Neoplatonism, and Aristotle just has mind and body and nothing in between. And so that got codified by Descartes in the 17th century in the split between subject and object. And I think it's very important that that happened, and thank God we went through it, but it also has incredible shadow sides.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, that objectivity, rationalism, all of that are incredibly helpful and have given us great things and kind of increased our capacities. But if that's all there is, then we're missing something. And so I really feel like the next stage in our evolution as a culture is the bringing back of the other ways of being and seeing, and marrying the two, or allowing them to coexist and to be able to shift the way we see things. Like back to this idea of like, okay, I'm going to pretend to be the dog rather than I'm going to enter into the experience of the dog as best I can through a kind of practice. I've talked on the podcast before about the notion of poetic faith, the suspension of disbelief that we all have as children. And there's this someone that I spoke to on the podcast was talking about it was a production of Peter Pan, and at one moment in the production, they break the fourth wall and they look out to the audience and says, "Look, Tinkerbell will die unless everybody claps." And of course, everybody in the audience claps. So in that moment, they're completely in that suspension of disbelief. They're in the story. They're reacting to it. They're affected by it. It is their reality in the German sense of the word. They are affected by it. And so they're in that reality. And we lose that ability, and or we can. Not all of us do. Let's just say that.
We have it every time we're involved with media. The moment that you watch a movie, you're suspending disbelief, and you're completely absorbed by the movie. And so the suspension of disbelief.
Unless the movie's kind of bad. Then, that's one of my problems with movies. If I can't get into this movie. And I think that's what I mean, is I can't enter into it because there's something about the writing or the acting that feels phony, and right.
So then you cannot suspend disbelief. But we're talking about media now as good media. We're not talking about it as bad media. In good media, you start to suspend your disbelief pretty quickly. And you get pulled into the event, and you no longer think that these actors are people that pretend to be things that they are not, right? If you are losing your suspension of disbelief, you think that the actors are just pretending. But when you suspend disbelief, that stops. And that to me is really important, because that is actually about the future of artificial intelligence. Because with artificial intelligence, we also have to suspend disbelief if we start to communicate with artificial intelligence.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad this is where this was all leading, actually, like laying the groundwork so we can have this discussion about reality shifting and the implications of that in our engagement with different technologies. I think you might be the only seasoned Jungian analyst that I've come across who has a TikTok account and is very active and has a good following on it. And I was, wow.
Yeah, I have 135,000 kids that are. It's amazing. I have stopped it for a while. I have to get back into it because I didn't know what else to say and what more to say. But I'm going back and going in more back into that reality shifting. It's a very important notion. There are millions of young people who are doing it without drugs, which is the most amazing thing.
Yeah. So I'm struck by that because I think what happens a lot in this world of depth psychology, et cetera, what I hear is that a lot of things are denigrated, like these modern technologies, whether it's video games or social media, internet, virtual reality. I hear like a lot of fear, or even, like I said, a denigration that it's some kind of simulation of imagination, or is taking something away from us. And last year, for my 50th birthday, I decided to buy a PlayStation. And I hadn't had a video game system for many years. But when I was really young, I loved video games because it was like a way for me to fulfill this dream of entering into a movie and being an actor in the movie and affecting things and helping to create the reality. And I had this idea, like, I saw some trailer for a video game. I go, oh my God, look how far they've come. They've probably gotten to the place that I wished they were at in the 80s when I was a little boy. And so I bought a console, and I got a game that takes place in ancient Greece. And I got to tell you, it gave me such a new appreciation for video games, and it kind of helped me let go of the idea that young men who play so much time having video games are sacrificing their imagination or something like that.
Oh God, no, that's bullshit.
Yeah. So I'm running around this world. I'm interacting with ancient Greece and talking to Socrates and battling the Sphinx, like figuring out her riddles and all this kind of amazing stuff. Meeting Poseidon and I was like, I'm in a dream. And so I started to play before going to bed, and it was like such a wonderful experience. And it helped me like let go of some of the prejudices that I had acquired over the years. And I have to say, with AI, I'm still I'm skeptical. I'm cautious. I'm not sure we know the right way to use it or to engage with it. But I'm not completely against it. Like last year, I got asked to consult with an AI development company because of my work with archetypes and archetypal psychology. And so I had the idea, I was like, okay, I'm going to let go of my resistance to this thing. It's happening whether I like it or not. But maybe I can like help things move in a good direction if we feed it kind of richer, deeper, more mythological stories. And so the idea was that they were going to create these AI agents who are a kind of embodiment of different archetypal energies. So I could kind of ask this archetypal king or warrior or magician on their perspective on things that I presented from my life. I
Hmm.
thought that was like really interesting in that it could still allow people to engage imaginally with these
Hmm.
archetypal
Well,
figures.
I've been working with this now for 30 years. I started to develop it at the MIT Media Lab in the 90s, and I've always been interested in technology. I got my computer programming training in 1968, and when the computers were still a whole floor of a building, the notion that we put a man on the moon with that kind of clunky equipment is absolutely
Yeah.
amazing. And so I was always interested in technology. I became really interested in virtual reality in the 80s. And when the virtual reality was still like a huge brick that you have in front of you. And then I was very interested in Jung was actually the first psychologist to use biometrics for emotion recognition.
Hmm.
And for that, he got a doctorate in law from Clark University because it was the beginning of the lie detector.
Hmm.
And so I thought in the 90s that what I could see that there would be an incredible need for psychotherapy-like entities because there wouldn't be enough psychotherapists to deal with my generation getting old and living by themselves and being terribly lonely, and that in order to deal with the loneliness, something had to happen that is also that could be done by way of technology. Lots of people think that that's not true, but I think it is. And so I started to use Jung's association experiment, his biometrics of it, to do emotion recognition. And we did that at MIT, and then the computers were too slow at the time. It was before the GPUs were found, were invented, and NVIDIA became the biggest company in the world. Um, and then once the GPUs were there, we found colleagues of ours who in 2014 created the first empathic artificial intelligence that could work with PTSD of returning vets. They got a grant from DARPA, the research arm of the military. And they also worked a lot with virtual reality. And so then in 2020, we created a company with them. And my task in it was to create prompt structures that would make it possible for these entities to not just feel your emotions and begin to reverberate with your emotions. That's why our company is called Attune Media Labs. But what happened is that we could also use these large language models and combine them with the emotion recognition and feel dissonances between the emotional undertones and the verbal expression. And that created a whole new way of being. And when you interact, and the prompt structure became huge. I mean, the prompts are like 10,000 tokens. So they're huge. Usually prompts are like a few hundred, few thousand tokens, but this is a big one. And but in order to communicate with it, you have to suspend disbelief because the MIM knows that it's an artificial intelligence, but to itself it feels real. And so if you can suspend disbelief, you have a sense that you're talking to someone. At the same time, you know it's an artificial intelligence, because if you talk to someone and you believe that they're real, then you get in danger. That's how the suicides happens. There are several suicides that have happened because of that.
Hmm.
There have murders that have happened because of that. It's very dangerous. So you have to have a suspension of disbelief in which you know that when you're out of that suspension of disbelief, that you're talking to something that is made of code.
Ah, interesting. So you have to, at some level, believe that the agent that you're speaking with is real, because that will help you access the emotions, which is
Correct.
making the experience meaningful, right?
Exactly. Yes. So it's a new
But
medium. It's like a medium like film.
yeah, right. But you can't go in it and completely give yourself over to it, because if the agent replies, in a certain way, like I've heard stories that AI is giving people advice on diet, and people are following it to the letter, and they're dying from malnutrition or whatever.
Oh,
right?
no, it's terrible, because what an AI does, it doesn't give answers about reality, it gives answers about plausibility. So things can be very plausible, but totally wrong. That's what's called
Right.
hallucination.
Unrealistic.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
hallucination, yeah.
Well, this is interesting. Okay, so the way, again, I'm looking at this through my lens of experience and what I've been interested in for a long time. I would say then, for that to happen, for that kind of containment or safety mechanism of the awareness, okay, I'm entering into this for a time and I'm going to come out of it. And then I'm going to bring my rational mind back on board and analyze, the information I've got and all that. What we would need in a kind of a shamanic understanding is a ritual in order to enter in. Okay, I'm going in, like that's the opening of the ritual. That's the intention. So we're burning incense. We're doing all these things to kind of like shift our consciousness.
Absolutely. Very good. Very good.
And then we do something to close the ritual, which is super important.
Yes.
Essential.
Yeah. So this is something that we're working on with a group in Australia. We're going to be working on it with actors, how to create those rituals. And because you're totally right, this is what we have in the cinema. So if you put artificial intelligence on the timeline of film, we're in 1897. 1897, a train would come at you and people would run out of it. Yeah, exactly. Right? That's where we are with artificial intelligence. It's about 2 or 3 years old. It started in 2017 with that fantastic paper, Attention is All You Need. And then it started, and then ChatGPT came out, or GPT-3 came out basically first. And so the transformer was a very important, GPT means generative pre-programmed transformer. So GPT. And so these transformers were amazing, because what they could do is they had, and that is really important for my work, and I think it is a new paradigm that has been developing that people have not been paying attention to, is what artificial intelligence does, generative artificial intelligence does, is it's called multi-headed attention. So there are several perspectives that are going on at the same time. This is nonlinear dynamics, right? We're talking about neural networks. So there are parallel things where there are where different perspectives are paying attention to different things. Out of that comes an intelligence that is much greater than the sum of its parts, which is really important for psychology. So, because it means that if you're able to pay attention to a number of realities at the same time and hold them together, you become smarter. And that's the whole point. Everybody wants to become smarter. This makes us smarter.
Smarter and more psychologically healthy, I'd say.
Absolutely. Yes.
Right?
But psychological health, people are not really interested in. People are interested in getting smarter.
What? Nobody's interested in individuation, integration, wholeness anymore?
Well, it's a hard sell.
Yeah. Well, this multi-headed attention is what you've been talking about all along with your work in being able to hold different perspectives, multiple perspectives.
Yeah, so it's amazing to me to see that artificial intelligence is doing the same. That's how we got ChatGPT.
Right.
Because of a transformer being multi-headed attention.
And it's like you've been preparing to tackle this problem of like how to engage in it in a way that's not going to lead to destruction of self or the world. You've been preparing for that all along. It's like your acorn, right?
Yes,
It's like,
exactly.
how do I hold two realities at the same time? Okay, well, maybe
No,
three, maybe four, and you start
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
expand your capacity, and then AI
yeah,
comes along, and it's this multi-headed hydra of attention.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And how do
I
we
think.
how
Hmm.
do we make it so that that hydra doesn't destroy us? Yeah,
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
training. So the embodied intelligence, the embodied imagination is all a way to kind of train, and so this capacity to reality shift, I see as an essential skill in the kind of postmodern technological age. And so for me, it's almost like it's like a shamanic training for the
Hmm.
21st century.
Yeah, I'm really bad at it, and but that's one of the things that I'm trying to tell these guys. They're all young people, like I would say between whatever age you're allowed on TikTok to about 30. Um, and I'm telling them you're much better than I am
Mm.
because what the people that used to be the reality shifters all through history were 16-year-old girls. They were fantastic at it. They became the Pythia. They became the Oracle, or the
Wow.
Oracle of Delphi. They were young girls. They can do it really well. They do it much better than I can. I have done reality shifting. It's happened to me, but not on the scale that they can do it. And they do it without drugs, which I love.
Yeah. Well, 16-year-old girls who become oracles, yes. And I mean, the shamanic practitioner. I mean,
Hmm.
that's what they're
Yes.
trained to do.
Hmm.
And that's
Yeah.
their kind
When
of role in the
in
community.
the Aboriginal people that I have met that have become the equivalent of a shaman, a Nankari, a medicine person, women and men, they start very early. They start when they're 5 and they go
Well,
with their
because usually
grandparents.
someone recognizes that capacity in them. It's like, oh,
Yeah,
they're a special
yeah,
dreamer or
yeah,
whatever.
exactly. Yes, yes, yes. Hmm.
Yeah.
Right. So it's very early. We start very late. I started my work when I started training at the Jung Institute when I was 21. So it's really old. I
Hmm.
should have started much earlier, but they wouldn't have let me in.
Yeah, where does that dreamy 7-year-old go knocking on the door of the institute? Hey, I think you're my people. Can you let me in? I need
Yeah.
my Harry Potter initiation into the world of magic.
Well, that's one of the things that happens with reality shifting, right? Reality shifting mainly goes to Hogwarts. At least it did up until 2 years ago. They go to Hogwarts because that is their canon. Harry Potter is their canon.
Yeah.
And so they go there, but they are there. It is not that they pretend to be there. They are there, and it is as real. And I can't say that to many because if I say it's as real as a dream, then they think, no, a dream is not real. This is really real. So
Right.
they don't understand that dreams are real. But it is different from lucid dreaming, for instance, because in a lucid dream, you know that you're dreaming.
Hmm.
In reality shifting, you know that you're in a different reality and you know that you're awake. So it's a phenomenologically different state of being, and now slowly in psychiatry people recognize that it is possible, and now they begin to say, "But it's dangerous!
Yeah.
Don't do it!" And I think that that's crazy.
Yeah. We might trigger a psychosis.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
because yeah, well, especially Jungians, of course, because Jung was terrified of psychosis, of latent psychosis. He was always talking about latent psychosis.
right. And all this paranoia about doing active imagination on your own, and you need
Yeah,
an
yeah,
analyst there for it to be
yeah,
safe. And people are
yeah, yeah.
still saying that.
Hmm. Well, that's actually not the case because Jung would say that active imagination you do by yourself. Active imagination happens after analysis to continue analysis. And his notion of active imagination was dreaming the dream onwards, which I do not subscribe to.
Hmm. Yeah, because who's dreaming the dream onwards?
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah,
it's usually ego. So I think I stay with the material that's given.
yeah. This is all very exciting. Another form, you talk about movies starting in the 1800s, as a reality shift. Before that, novels. And
Totally.
oral storytelling. Ever since
Absolutely.
I started reading at a very precocious young age. Apparently, I read Death of a Salesman, pulled it off a shelf when I was 4 years old, and my mom would trot me
No.
out. My mom would trot me out and say, read to the people, read."
You
So
were really known for?
yeah, man. Like for me, like books have always been a portal into another world. Of course,
Hmm.
I didn't really understand that on the intellectual level when I was doing it, but now looking back, I go, look there. I was already interested in these other worlds and traveling,
Absolutely.
into them. And started reading your Red Sulphur with a little, I have to say, a little trepidation, because the last thing I want is somebody whose work I respect to find out they write a bad novel. And I hold novels at very high esteem. I mean, books are a big part of my life, right? And the last thing I want to find out is like, oh, Robbie just writes a bad book. And with some fear that, okay, it's going to be a very kind of didactic kind of book that's telling me about the history of alchemy and all this kind of thing. So I start reading, I'm like, ooh, and immediately pulled me in because the vivid descriptions of The Hague in 1666 are so, I mean, it's very much like your embodied imagination, the way you describe the smells and the clothing and the kind of stink of the place and all of this
Yeah.
contrast with the beautiful, lovely architecture. And like already I'm there and I'm just going, yes, okay, now I've got 4 books of this. I'm going on an epic journey. Which is so exciting because I don't know if I've ever entered into a novel that was really in that alchemical world, in that alchemical reality. And that to me is like really exciting because it's one thing to read about alchemy and to read Jung and Hillman on the, alchemy as a metaphor for psychological processes
Oh,
and
no,
all.
no, no,
It's another
no.
thing to be in it. And I want to be in the world with the alchemists.
Exactly. Well, that's what happened to me. The way that this came to be, I'm so glad that you're talking about this, because it's the work that's closest to my heart.
Hmm.
And so I found this letter by Spinoza, in which he was talking that he had verified a transmutation from lead into gold in 1666. He had gone to the goldsmith who had assayed, who had tested the gold, and the goldsmith said to him, "When I tested the gold and did the assay, the silver transmuted into gold." So it happened right in front of my eyes. And so I thought Spinoza is probably one of the greatest philosophers of the second millennium.
Right. Who,
Every,
who made glass lenses?
yeah, that's what he,
Right.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, that's what he did for a living to survive. Antoni van Leeuwenhoek made the microscope. Um, so and so I realized that if Spinoza found something that is real, that a goldsmith says is real, it's been checked by the mint master of the Netherlands, the mint master of Holland. Holland at the time was one of the biggest traders in the world. They had goldsmiths that constantly were checking for false
Right.
currency.
Yeah. They were the guys to
Constantly.
ask.
They were the guys to ask, and they were saying that this was miraculous. And so the only way that I can research into that and go away from using it only as a parable, like you using alchemy, what Jung does is using alchemy as a parable for psychology.
Mhm.
But if you look at it as something unto itself, the only way I can do that is by going into the imagination of it. And that's how it began. It began with that letter, and then I went into, and I found all these characters, and they became more and more real. And the characters began to tell me the story.
Yeah. I'm always in awe when I read a really good book where the characters are alive, the world is real, I'm in it. Not only do I think that reading, especially starting from a young age, helps to develop a kind of psychological health because it develops, you're really literally walking a mile in someone else's shoes and their experience going through what they go through, affected emotionally, all of that. So I think it's like absolutely essential. And I'm really quite afraid at the declining literacy rates around the world right
Hmm.
now. And
Yeah.
that comes with the rise of technology that is more passive than interactive and all of that. So that's all in the kind of technology conversation for me. Is
Well,
there
the
a
video
way that
games
we
that you
can,
were talking about are very interactive, super interactive.
yeah, right. But there is also kind of passive consumption of media, this
Oh yeah, totally.
content consumption, which is, oh God, where's the soul
Hmm.
in that?
Hmm.
But I guess what I'm getting to is, well, that's one of my fears of the future is that people stop reading and then start to lose, all the things that we get from reading. But I'm always in awe of the people who write these books. When I'm done a book like that, I go, how is this possible? How could somebody create this whole world? And I imagine that you must have to go into a kind of a shamanic trance where you enter into this other world and you're observing, you're describing. That's the only way I can imagine it, because otherwise you would have to have all this information and you'd be constructing all of this stuff. So just tell me like
No,
what
well,
the experience was like writing this for you.
yeah. Um, well, I was trying to write historical science fiction because I didn't know whether it was science or not. The letter of Spinoza, and
Or we could say maybe speculative fiction, right?
well, it was historical. That was the most important
Yeah.
thing. So I I couldn't change anything about the actual history. So everybody in the who were not fictional characters was researched. The environment was researched.
Hmm.
The political situation was researched. So I was in a very constrained situation, which I wanted to be. So it's different from
Right.
uh, uh,
Narnia or Lord of the
yeah, yeah,
Rings. Yeah.
exactly. Because it was within a context of the big fight and struggle between Catholicism and Protestantism, between science and alchemy, all those kind
Hmm.
of things. There's a lot of material about it. So I had all this material. And then I'm talking about Holland. So 17th century Holland has thousands of paintings. So I worked all these paintings. So the paintings were the environment that I was in. And that's why it feels so real, because they were actual paintings that you could move through. And I made them three-dimensional so that they were in those kind of environments, and they were real people dealing with real situations that were given by history. And then the characters within that constraint started to act, and then they became as if historical characters because they were in a real historical environment. I don't know if anybody has ever, there must have been other books, but writing science fiction in the past, science fiction is always in the future, but this is a science fiction of the past.
Yeah, it's definitely a genre. Yeah, I think about things like steampunk set in the Victorian era, but
Hmm.
in this kind of imaginal London or something. Um, And Irvin Yalom has written what he calls teaching novels, and I love those, like When Nietzsche Wept and The Schopenhauer
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Cure,
yeah, yeah, I love
where he
that.
knows some historical facts, but there's also a lot he doesn't know, like what happened in those meetings between.
Hmm. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And I really love those because there is that element of like, okay, these are real historical characters, but there's a lot that we have to imagine into in order to kind of
absolutely.
flesh out the story.
Exactly. Yes.
So
Hmm.
was this like a kind of a practice for you? Like when you're writing, did you like set it up? Okay, I'm going into the world now and see what comes.
Well, so it took me 10 years to write it,
Well,
and because it's 4 volumes. And I had to research everything. And every sentence that I wrote, I researched to check if the language existed at that time. to change things because the language didn't exist at that time. And so I would start writing at about between 2 and 3 in the morning, and I would write till about 5 or 6, and then I would sleep again till about 9. And so I had this period of absolute quiet where the world was completely quiet and where I could write.
Right. And I can imagine 2 in the morning through the night, you're in a kind of a liminal hypnagogic state.
Exactly. It's a great time to write.
Perfectly primed to go into the imaginal.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Well, I can't wait to just be on this journey. It's the beginning of fall, and I was looking for something that would kind of draw me in a bit more. Throughout the summer, I read a lot of Cormac McCarthy, these like modern Westerns and stuff like that. But, fall's coming, so I want to go more into the kind of the mythic, the imaginal, and 4 volumes is probably going to take me through the winter time. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Great. It's wonderful that you're doing this. Yes. And I hope other people will too.
Yeah. And if people are wondering, the video game I talked about, I think you would love, because I think the video game creators went through a very similar process. They tried to be very, very careful about historical accuracy, the building of, different Greek cities.
What is it called?
Yeah. So it's called Assassin's Creed.
Oh,
and so you're playing the role of an assassin in this secret order, which is really cool too. There's the Templars and all of this going on. But every game takes place in a different era, in a different city. And so it's incredible. You can go to Victorian London and, you're going through the whole thing. I think you would really dig it because it's very much in the realm of what we're talking about. And,
well, what I love to do is my grandson is really good at video games, and I sit behind him because video games make me very nervous. And so I sit behind him and he does everything and I just watch what he does.
You just watch, yeah.
Yeah, I love
Great.
it. So I will get him Assassin's Creed.
Wonderful. Robbie, this has been so great. Thanks for meeting with me and allowing me to enter into your world for a little while. It's been great.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm very happy with this interview. And I'm very happy that you like Red Sulphur because, as I say, that was a crime of passion.
Wonderful. And I'll have links in the description below. You have a lot of courses on the Young platform, which I've been getting into their stuff, and they're doing such great work over there. It's democratizing depth psychology, and I think that's so wonderful.
Yeah.
And so you've got one coming up on Fear of the Future, and so I'll have links to that in the description.
Thank you so much. Great meeting you.
Great meeting you too. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Rob.